I'm under the impression that if I mention the Origins mod, I'm sure 99% of you will recognise from an old server back in 2021. A server that had a strong cast list headlining Tommy in it, Phil's of Minecraft, AMZ TV, and even some Scottish representation and all. So if you didn't recognise it, you basically pick an origin which works like a sort of class or quirk that completely changes the way you play the game in its entirety. I decided instead of digging through old VODs and trying to match the old mod versions to that server like for like, I've decided to take the most popular route of taking the most popular mod pack that's publicly accessible and using that as our basis to judge on. What we're judging on? Well, we're going to rank all 12 different origins against one another today and find out which is the best one. So let's waste no further time and actually start experimenting on our very first origin on the list right now. What is going on? So what actually changes if you play as an Enderian in the Origins mod? Well, believe it or no, because you're playing as an Enderman, you've got a teleportation ability. You see, if I simply just look in a direction, press a key on my keyboard, I throw an ender pearl and you'll see a bar at the bottom of my screen refill for the next time I can throw one. What has happened to you? Okay, ignoring that, yeah, you saw we can teleport, yeah, look, ender pearl, wow! Look, I can throw like multiple in the sky at the same time. Whoa, look, it's an ender pearl. Okay, you know what an ender pearl is, I don't need to explain ender pearl, but is there any other abilities I have to talk about? Well, believe it or not, considering we're playing as an enderman, if I go and decide, oh wow, here's a bit of water, let's jump inside, look at my hearts. My hearts are going down and I'm going to die because water is bad for endermen. Tell you what, by the way, that water did quite a bit of damage. Good thing I prepared myself a wee picnic at the top of my castle to eat. Pumpkin pie to get my hearts back up. I'm sure this can go not wrong at all as an enderman. Oh yeah, I can't eat pumpkin pie because endermen are scared of pumpkins. Yeah. However, if I go and get a carved pumpkin, I can more than happily put that on my head. But there is a little side effect of a carved pumpkin being on someone's head when you're using this mod. As you see, any other origin that wears a pumpkin on their head around you cannot be seen by your enderman eyes and are completely invisible. Yeah, you can get snuck up on and pranked by all your friends if they're wearing a pumpkin on their head. It's very, very infuriating. There's one final buff for the enderman origin that's arguably the greatest of them all. You see, if I take this oak plank and try place it as far as I can place it all the way to that block there. However, if I were to change myself back into a regular Minecraft human, I have no chance of even attempting to place it over there, and instead the furthest I can place it is just there. I can't get my thing to highlight over those blocks. This is because as the Enderman origin, you can reach blocks and entities from 1.5 blocks further than you normally can. I'm not going to deny that having a wee bit of trouble with water is certainly worth having infinite ender pearls and further block reach. However, difficulties with carved pumpkin players, having them be completely invisible is a very, very, very big negative if you're playing with other players. And that's what's going to cost this origin a spot in the S tier, and it's just going to land itself in A tier for now. I'm telling you, you're not going to believe it! The literal God of Time has just showed up to inform me of a message. They have told me that if I don't hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the calendar year, they are going to swap the liquid of all apple and orange juice in the world with one another. So quick, tell your friends, family, neighbour, your goldfish all do their part to not let the time god win, and subscribe now! Next on our list of origins is an origin that's all based on the slime mob. Now as soon as I click select, you're going to notice one big difference, and that is immediately I'm turning a transparent green colour. I think my head's also meant to be affected, but because the repo mod's being a little like, whoa, look at my mouth move up and down and yap, 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 it probably messes with it in some way, shape or form or something. Apart from turning your skin green, what other benefits does the slime give you? You might have already noticed, but every time I touch the ground, I'm now bouncing on every block as if it's a slime block. And I'm also jumping incredibly high. Albeit I walk a little bit slower now. This is me sprinting, by the way, without jumping, just for reference. I am a little bit of a slow guy now. Considering I'm now currently bouncing on every single block, it also means if I were to accidentally slip off the tower, oh no, I'm just going to bounce and I'm not going to take any fall damage, which is kind of useful. Albeit you can avoid the bounce if you just crouch as you land. It does still negate fall damage, so it's definitely a useful option. Can you believe there's one feature of being slime I've not yet talked about, and it's probably the best feature there is about being this origin. As soon as you die, look at that. You get pretty much a passive automatic Totem of Undying, albeit you're a little smaller now. You have a little bit less hearts, but you continue to live on. But do you know what's better than one passive Totem of Undying? Well, it would be two! 2 passive Totems of Undying, albeit you get even smaller, with even less hearts. I'm struggling to get up off the slab, there we go. You're even smaller, you've got less hearts, but you have yet another Totem of Undying that you have passively on you that doesn't need to be in your inventory. Although there is one big negative of being a slime I've not yet talked about. As you see here, we're teetering at the edge of a jungle about to go into a desert biome, and if I start walking into a desert biome, yeah, I'm gonna start burning alive and completely die because I cannot handle hot weather as a slime. For me, when I look at all the benefits you get with the Slimecican origin, it is absolutely one of the best origins you can possibly be. I know certain biome troubles are a wee bit annoying, but you can just have a shulker box in your e-chest filled with fire rays and you're pretty much good to go to completely negate that from ever affecting you. And that's why I'm going to present the argument that the Slimecican actually deserves to be all the way up in S tier. The Blazeborn origin is up next, but what does it change when you play the game? What if I show you one of the big changes right now by breaking my bed and getting rid of my spawn point? As you see now, if I jump off the tower and end up dying and have to respawn, look where my natural spawn now moves me to. I am now in the Nether, and this is how your world will start if you decide to pick the Blazeborn origin. However, if you think it's going to be all scary in the Nether, I have one bit of good news for you while you try to make it back to the overworld. You see all this fire that's populated around the Nether? If I jump into it, I don't take any damage. As a Blazeborn, you are immune to all fire-based damage. And as a little bonus, while you're on fire, if you inflict damage on any player or mob, you will do an additional 3 hearts of damage. However, if those fire buffs weren't enough for you, there's actually a few more benefits to being a Blazeborn. Now, just to show this is not the same circumstance for all potions, if I were to go to the Swiftness potion in my inventory, splash it down, you'll see I do get the speed effect on my character. However, the same cannot be said if I try give myself poison, as I'm completely immune. And the same goes if I go to eat rotten flesh and try to get hunger, you'll see it does not affect me either. You cannot get either poison or hunger when you're a Blazeborn. Oh, and believe it or not, considering you're a Blazeborn, you're born in the Nether and all your abilities are being immune to fire, just like an Enderman, if I jump in water, you'll see I'll immediately start taking damage and lose my hearts very, very quickly. There's one last feature of being a Blazeborn that I'll show you by using a snowball. Now you see, if I throw the snowball right up in the air and try to make sure it catches me, if I just make sure this lines up correctly, I take 3 hearts worth of damage. It doesn't matter if the snowball's thrown by me, another player, or even a snow golem, all snowballs will effectively do 3 hearts of damage to you as a Blazeborn. Look, I honestly don't think spawning the Nether is that big of a disadvantage, because once it's done and over, you never have to deal with it again as long as you have a bed. And when you combine all the extra damage modifiers you get when you're on fire, along with being completely immune to poison, the Blazeborn actually looks like a really, really strong origin. However, its very big telling weakness to snowballs of all things to do 3 hearts of damage makes it impossible for me to justify its inclusion in anything above a C tier, albeit it's a very, very, very high C tier. But aye, it's Avian next, which is basically like the chicken origin, but what does it change in your experience? The very first ability seems good on paper, and that is you'll just float down at anywhere you jump off of and not take any fall damage. Although if you jump and crouch, you will still fall fast and you will still take fall damage. However, one big flaw of floating down everywhere you go is you see here, if I've got a staircase that's made of slabs for example, and I try to walk down it, you can already kind of see the issue here is you manoeuvring about anywhere normally kinda gets really, really infuriating because you're just gonna float and topple and just stick onto everything in the world. It's not very nice. But look up at how dark the sky suddenly is. There's no way I can get up to my tower in time to sleep. I've got to take a night in one of these houses. I'm sure nothing will go wrong if I just place my blue bed inside this house. Oh, yeah, you saw that error message, right? You need fresh air to sleep. But what on earth does that actually mean? Well, if we have a look at the coordinates and I try to place my bed here on Y level 85 and try sleep, I will still get the same error message. However, if I try on Y level 86, place down the bed and try sleep, I suddenly can sleep. To sleep, as a chicken or avian, you must have an altitude of at least positive Y86 to even rest in a bed. Although if you do rest in the bed, once you wake up you will get a little treat every single start of a new day. You'll get an egg thrown right in your inventory every single new day. As the Avian origin, you will permanently have a swiftness buff on your character at all times to move everywhere, just that little bit quicker. Tell you what, I'm pretty hungry after explaining all that. Let's go have a look at what snacks I've got prepped for myself here. Oh, look at all this cooked meat. I wonder if there's going to be anything to do with meat and the chicken variant. Yeah, you can probably guess any type of meat whatsoever as a chicken you simply cannot eat. You simply have to be a vegetarian if you play as an Avian inside the Origins mod. In all honesty, the Avian Origins actually just really infuriating to play with in my personal opinion. You can't sleep properly, you lose half of the possible food sources you could ever have, and of course you can't walk about properly on different Y levels without just floating off on things and just sort of having to wait about for ages. Dealing with all that just for the benefit of a wee bit of slow falling and a free egg every day is not really worth it in my opinion. Dealing with all that just for a permanent slow falling and getting an egg at the start of every new day is certainly not worth it. And it's going to be why the Avian is the very first of the F tiers. Next up on our list of origins is the Spider origin, otherwise called the Arachnid, but I'm going to end up mispronouncing that, so I'm just going to keep calling it the Spider origin. You'll immediately notice now that I've picked this origin, I'm now missing 3 hearts on my HUD. However, you do have one really cool ability with the Spider origin when you click your ability button. As I've now clicked it, if I try jump up here, you can see I can climb up any single block ever. You see, it works like an option you can toggle on and off, and when it's enabled, any block you latch onto, you can just immediately climb up onto. And that of course does mean I can climb all the way back up to the top of the tower if I fall. However, when you play as this origin, you actually get an exclusive crafting recipe. You can now take your string, simply put 2 string in your crafting UI, and you will get cobwebs. Now you might wonder why this is useful. Well, if I place down a bunch of cobwebs here, you'll see I can just wander through them far quicker than a normal player would. And if I have my ability enabled, I can climb up the cobwebs to the very top. However, there's one more ability with cobwebs I have left to show. That was totally first try, by the way. This did not take like 8 takes to land that clutch. You see, if I walk into my farm that I have here filled with sheep and cows, if I go into the sheep farm and I decide I want to crit a sheep, for the next few seconds they will be stuck in a cobweb. This also affects hostile mobs you're fighting and is a very big advantage. This cobweb sticks around for 3 whole seconds and it has a 6-second cooldown of when it can happen again. Now you see, the diet requirement for being a chicken was you've got to be a vegetarian. However, if you're a spider, you actually have to be a carnivore, as I cannot eat carrots. However, this steak in my inventory I can happily eat. Oh, also if any other players hit you with a sword that has Bane of Arthropods, it has a damage multiplier because you're a spider. It's not something you ever want to find out the repercussions of. Please do not let it happen. All your benefits of moving about inside cobwebs, being able to craft cobwebs whenever you want and them appearing when you end up critting someone every few seconds is all very good for the arachnids. However, all the benefits have very specific use cases of really getting any massive bonus out of them. When you consider that and also consider the fact that you lose 3 whole hearts when you play as this origin, it's just okay, I guess. I'm going to present the argument that the Arachnid deserves to be in C tier, although I think it's a very worse C tier compared to the Blazeborn, but it's certainly not in the F tier levels of the Avian. Next up on our list of origins is an origin called the Elytrian. As soon as I click select, you'll notice the very big positive of having this origin. On my back, at all times without taking an armor slot, you will have an Elytra always on your back. This also does mean if I was to get a chest plate of any kind, I can actually put it on in the slot at the same time of having an Elytra. However, there's a reason I actually picked chainmail to show this off. You see, any armour that has a protection value above that of chainmail cannot be equipped if you're an Elytrian, so no iron armour and no diamonds and no netherite. There's also a few bonuses you get while you're flying about on your Elytra. You see, while I'm flying, if I go to strike a mob with a melee attack, I will do double the damage that I normally do. As you see there at the top, far more damage has been done against that pick than that of just a normal punch. However, to equal out this effect, if I start flying my Elytra and accidentally crash, I take far more kinetic damage. In fact, it's an extra 50% kinetic damage. You might notice currently I have no potion effects on, but there's something that can change that I'll show you right now. If I was to wander under a gap that has a height of 2 blocks, eventually I will get an effect. There we go, I've got an effect of weakness and slowness that will get higher and higher in its duration and can go up to a maximum of 3 minutes if you're in a situation where there is a very low roof above your head. Oh, also remember how I said there was the ability button that helped us out with the spider to be able to climb up things whenever you wanted as a toggle? Well, the ability button as an Elytrian kinda launches you up into the sky. You can notice at the bottom of my screen there is actually a cooldown of using this ability of every 20 seconds. However, when you use it, you get launched 30 blocks into the sky. Starting off your world with a permanent elytra and the ability to launch yourself up in the sky right from the off does sound incredible. And when you combine with the fact that when I tell you, oh, it doesn't take up a chest place bit in your armour UI, you go, where can I sign up? However, that armour buff isn't quite as good as it sounds, as if you can only wear up the chainmail anyway. Having an extra chest plate on along with your elytra isn't actually a big buff, is it? It's a really fun origin, don't get me wrong, but all of its positives get phased out the longer you play the world, and its negatives will always stay. So it can't quite get into S tier no matter how much fun it actually is to play as it. So I'm going to put it in A tier, although it's nowhere near as good practically as the Enderian, but you know, it's just really fun to use. You've got wings, you know what I mean? Next up on our list of origins is an origin called the Feline, which otherwise means an origin that turns you into a cat. And one difference you'll notice right away is as a cat, you simply cannot take fall damage. However, in return you do lose one of your hearts, as you now only have 9 hearts when you play as the Feline origin. You do jump super high when you're sprinting and can actually jump up to 2 blocks. As you can see here, I've got an oak log, oak leaves, that's 2 blocks. By sprint and jump, I can jump all the way over it. Also, as a Feline origin, any Shulk sensors you see will not be triggered by your steps whatsoever, however they still will be if you jump. This is because in the game logic you no longer emit the Minecraft steps sound effect. You also do gain a slight night vision effect permanently, but you do not keep it if you go underwater. Also, as a Feline, if I go and try approach this creeper, you're going to quickly see it wants nothing to do with me and is now actively running away. However, the skeleton certainly does, so I am going to run away. The final change is probably the worst one yet, and it affects your ability to mine. You see, if I try and mine this stone block right here, it'll work perfectly fine. However, if I were to choose a stone block that's inside of the cave with a bunch of stone around it, I cannot break it at all. If there is any more than 2 stone blocks adjacent to the stone you're trying to mine, if it's naturally spawned, you cannot mine it as the Feline origin. This effect can be negated if you have a potion of strength, drink it on up, and try and mine now. You can simply just mine as if it was normal. Let's be honest with ourselves here though, at the start of the game, you're not going to have strength, but are you? So you're going to be stuck in the early stages of the game hoping someone's going to help you, or you're hoping for a very, very naturally spawned cave to fit your specific requirements. This is the ranking that's completely undisputed for me and set in stone, and I have no doubts about it whatsoever. The positives are absolutely nowhere near good enough to basically rule out mining in any sort of normal fashion. I mean, if you can't mine in Minecraft, you're pretty much missing what half the game actually is. So for me, it's the undisputed bottom of F tier, and I don't see that changing no matter what comes up next. Next up on our list is an origin called the Shulk, which is based on the Shulker. As part of being a Shulker origin, you will always have 4 armor points on at all times. This can stack even though it doesn't display properly if you have it with netherite armor, for example, and make you even more powerful. Oh, and considering you're a Shulker, if I press my ability button, you'll see I have 9 slots of inventory. This doesn't take up normal inventory space, and even if you die, the items that you put in here will stay there to the next life. You might have noticed from me just walking down those stairs, everything you do as a Shulker exhausts your hunger bar at a 60% higher rate than normal. Also, as a Shulker, you see this natural stone block? Yeah, I can just punch and break it. As a trade-off for the extra armor, if you ever try equip a shield while you're a Shulker origin, you won't be able to use it at all. The button simply will not work and the shield will stay by your side, unable to be lifted to guard you from potential attacks. Honestly, when you look at the Shulk origin, it's actually just one of the best practical origins you could ever have, having a permanent extra 5-slot E-chest right off spawn. Then of course you've always got 4 slots of armor that are always filled in no matter what. Although I think compared to the other origins, it's actually missing just a wee fun gimmick side ability. Even if it's something as like silly as you've got a chorus fruit you can eat every 60 seconds just so it fits in with the end theme, anything like that would just be a nice neat touch. After mulling it over, I think I'm going to put the Shulk in B tier compared to the other ones. Next up on our list of different origins is actually the Phantom Mob, but you might be wondering why on earth am I staying inside to introduce this when I've been on top of this castle about every single other time? Well, there's a very simple reason for that. As you see, the sun's out right now, so if I try go on the roof of the castle, I will immediately be set on fire, which isn't very nice. You do have an ability to negate this fire effect though, and that is the ability to go completely invisible, and by process you can phase through any block ever. However, when you're in this mode, you might notice by looking at my hunger bars, you lose your hunger incredibly quickly. So being in this mode 24/7 is certainly not an option. However, for the effects I should have mentioned from the start, your skin is completely transparent and you're also down to 7 hearts. Did you know there's actually 2 blocks you cannot go through when you're in the invisible phantom state? Believe it or not, probably expected actually, it's obsidian and bedrock. You cannot phase through either of these blocks, but any other block in the game will work to go completely through whenever you're using the ability. It's a fun gimmick, don't get me wrong, be able to phase through walls whenever you want, but all the trouble you end up having with the sun and obviously all the hunger you lose from using it is just an absolute nightmare and causes headaches. And for that reason alone, I'm just not a massive fan of the Phantom Origin as a whole. I don't think it's quite enough for it to land in F tier, but I think I'm going to leave it at the bottom of the C tier option so far. Next up is actually an incredible origin called the Merling origin, which is basically like a fish. You'll notice immediately now that I'm on land and I'm the Merling origin, I have bubbles that will immediately start draining, and if those bubbles run out, I will start suffocating because I need to live inside of the ocean. However, you might have noticed in the water I've got a bit more free range movement than one normally would. I'm a little bit faster, a little bit more controlled, and I can literally just sit here floating as if I'm in creative mode in the air. I do also have perfect night vision underwater, albeit if you don't want it for whatever reason, you can just toggle it off with your ability button. Breaking blocks when you're underwater is no problem whatsoever, and it's as quick as if it was on the surface. However, did you know there's actually a way to fill up your bubble meter when you're on the surface, and that comes from using a bottle of water. You can simply just drink it on up, and look at that, the bubbles come straight back up. Also, if you invest in a conduit and put it down under the water, anywhere near the conduit you can breathe on the surface perfectly fine. Upon hearing all that, you might come to the argument of going, well, what is the point of all the benefits of being underwater if you just drown as soon as you're on the surface? But believe it or not, I'm going to show you how to survive as a Merling and how it makes it such a great origin. You see, it all comes down to the armour that you can manage to pick up. It's incredibly important to get Respiration 4 on a helmet, and probably as a little fun bonus, Depth Strider 3 on some boots. I'm going to quickly put on all this armour and show you how you will actually survive. Of course, you won't have all this armour straight away early game, so a turtle helmet with a bucket of water is probably your best bet. But once you have all this armour on, look at how slow you take suffocation damage first of all, and look at how little damage you actually take. You're pretty much just a regular human, you just have to eat slightly more to keep on top of your saturation levels. And with the benefit of Depth Strider 3, you'll go incredibly fast once you're in the ocean. However, what happens if we add a dolphin into the mix and start swimming now? You'll see we go insanely fast. It is actually incredible. I do think this will probably be the most controversial take out the whole tier list, but I do really strongly believe that the Merling origin is one of the best. I mean, all the negatives it can ever possess can all be managed and pretty much rendered obsolete once you've got the correct gear. And all the positives it gives you just cannot be matched by any other resource in the entire game. So I'm going to make probably the incredibly controversial decision of knocking off the Slimecican as the top spot, moving Merling to the very best of the S tiers available, and moving Slime to second. In terms of all the origins we've looked at so far, Merling does take the very top spot, but there's still a few more to go, isn't there? Believe it or not, it's time for the second last origin for us to rank, and it is the improved Inchling, which straight away you'll notice makes us very small. Now straight away you'll also notice we are down to just 5 hearts. That is a very low amount of hearts. If you think it's going to be a wee bit difficult to move about while you're this small, don't worry, there's a wee trick to help. You see this very tall mountain of blocks here? Well, I can just climb up it. Yeah, it's that easy. Any surface you can manage to find, you can simply just climb on top of, and it's that easy. So you'll never have any issues manoeuvring around. It turns out there's actually another ability you can use to manoeuvre around if walking around on your own sounds a little bit too tiresome. Any entity in the game, including other players, you can ride on by pressing your secondary ability button. Just like this. However, considering how small you are, if you try to swim, you'll notice it is incredibly difficult because you cannot sprint underwater and move around normally. And you also lose your hunger dramatically quickly while you're underwater trying to swim, because yeah, it takes quite a lot of force for a small guy to move his arms around and actually swim. Oh, also, because your arms are so much weaker, destroying any block is significantly slower. Look how long it takes to destroy a simple spruce slab. It takes absolutely forever. As an improved Inchling, you have a few changes to your attributes that are important to note as well. First of all, if you're using a sword or an axe, you have a quicker cooldown rate of 0.5 seconds for your attacks. However, you can't quite reach as far as your now block range for attacking is 0.25 blocks shorter. Meanwhile, your building range to actually reach and place down blocks is a whole block shorter. There's yet another ability that relates to whether you have a feather or a bit of paper in your hand. If you're holding either item and jump off anywhere, you will get slow falling as you're so light that paper and feathers can blow in the wind and lift you anywhere. Believe it or not, in this small state, you can actually consume sugar. By eating sugar, you'll be able to give yourself super speed and a boosted saturation that fills all the way up. If you look at the bottom, every bar saturation is completely filled. However, if one were to have too much sugar, considering how small you are, negative things can start to happen, as I'll now turn temporarily blind and rapidly lose a lot of my hunger for a whole minute. One last thing to note is if you try to put on any armour that's heavier than leather, you'll notice your movement speed decreases significantly and you will move far slower compared to the speedy legs that you once previously had. The improved Inchling is actually quite an interesting origin, although there's such a big lack of hearts and you can pretty much have no good armour on without losing all your positives of your speed. So in terms of its actual practical use, it's not a very good origin. However, there's something a bit endearing, a bit chaotic and a bit fun just playing as a wee man causing chaos, so I'm actually going to put him in the bottom of B tier. It's time for the final and by far the most complicated origin. We're about to delve into what changes when you are a fox. More specifically, the default fox, because going on to the different sizes is even more confusing. First of all, you'll immediately notice that we're now down to 8 hearts. Oh, and we're also ever so slightly shorter, because that is certainly not 2 blocks tall. One of the easiest passive abilities to prove is by jumping off the castle once again. As you'll see, we are now resilient to fall damage. We also sprint jump far higher and we run around so much quicker than a normal player. By the way, wolves and polar bears will automatically aggro if you're down as a fox origin. Oh, also if you bump into a fox and you crouch and right click, you can put the fox on your head. I'm not sure when this would be really useful, to be honest, but you can. Similar to the Shulker quirk, you also have extra inventory slots hidden behind one of your ability buttons. And just like the Shulker, if you die when there's stuff in here, you will keep it to the next life. We also have an additional combat ability, which is the Pounce ability. All damage you inflict in this Pounce status is increased by 200%. Your reach to attack other entities also increased to 115%, meanwhile the damage you receive is also increased to 200%. If you're no moving at all for a whole minute, or if you press a button on your keyboard, you can activate a sleeping mode where a sleeping fox will take your place. However, there's one more combat ability I'm about to show you that's very cool. If I crouch twice quickly, you'll see the bottom of my screen a bar filling up, and this is the hunt mode bar. In this phase, I can see all different entities that are around me completely highlighted in the distance, as there's the wolf, there's the polar bear, and a few skeletons and creepers down there, along with another one down there. Once I uncrouch, the bar will start going down, and the more mobs that I kill, the more the bar will now go up. During this mode, all your damage is increased by 125%, unless it's midnight, where then it turns to 150%. The food that you consume is also different as a fox, although not in a way that we normally expect that's been seen in the other origins. You'll get an extra saturation buff and even sometimes a regeneration 1 buff when you eat any berries or any prey that a fox would normally hunt. If your food group does not lie in any of those 2 categories, it will be nerfed by 50%. However, you have a few combat disadvantages when you're playing as a fox origin, such as a shield, which cannot be used when you're playing as a fox origin. Also, if you hold a mace, you will immediately receive slowness 5. Any damage done with a mace will be reduced by 50%, and there's seemingly a few other fun side effects that happen all by chance. Finally, any combination of armour that gives you 15 armour points, which is by the way what a full iron set would give you, gives you permanent weakness 1 and slowness 2. You might notice my skin is currently shaking and I now have speed and weakness applied to me. This is because currently there is a fear condition active, and as a Fox Origin you have multiple fears you need to conquer. Like you're scared of villagers, but you can cure that fear by getting Hero of the Village. You're scared of wardens, but if you kill 3 wardens the fear goes away. You're scared of withers as well, but it only takes 1 wither kill to conquer the fear. Same logic applies to the Ender Dragon. If your health ever goes below 3 hearts, you'll also have a fear status activate, and it can only be conquered if you die and respawn on 8 separate occasions. To get over a fear of lightning, you need to get struck by lightning on 16 separate occasions. However, the fears didn't stop there, as you're also scared of other origin types. You're scared of human, Enderman, Blazeborn and Shulk origin types. However, these fears are conquered if the player simply just pets you. Finally, you're also scared of the end of the Nether. You can conquer both dimensions by simply being in them for 10 minutes. By the way, this is 10 in real life minutes, not 10 Minecraft minutes, so you kinda gotta be there for a little while. Or if you have an Elytra equipped, you can immediately conquer the end or immediately conquer the Nether. If it ever starts raining, you will also go really slow. However, if you go undercover, you will immediately dry off and you'll lose the effect of slowness. We're almost there now, but if you go underwater, you will have less airtime under here, and your bubbles will go down very quickly. I believe the final side effect of being a Fox Origin is if you try to sleep when you're not under shade, it will simply not let you. There's a few tedious flaws you have to deal with playing as the Fox Origin, but overall embarking on the journey of conquering all the fears is actually really rewarding. And just for how ambitious it is to have all these features crammed inside of it, I'm actually going to put it in the bottom of A tier. That right there is the entire official tier list of all the origins in the Origins mod pack. You can let me know if there's any disagreement you have, or if anything else should be in a different position. Is there any things I didn't consider? And I'm assuming a lot of those opinions are going to be, why on earth is the Merling so high up? But regardless of all that, make sure you have a good day, night, and certainly rest of your life.